Hello and welcome back to 3PL Live Sessions. I'm Cameron Robertson, CEO of 3PL Systems, and I also have Michael Sternberg, Director of Sales, a co-host of 3PL Live Sessions with us. Today, we're going to be talking about the subject of buy versus build. So, Michael, do you mind kicking us off? What does that mean? What is the debate?
Yeah, so happy Friday, first of all. Good morning to everybody who's listening. But yeah, so buy versus build is kind of like an age-old debate, and you hear this debate all the time. And every probably few months, one of the big, like Metaphor does articles on this stuff, or another big company will put out their viewpoint on it. And it's really simple. You have two camps, right? You have people that say, if the software exists out of box and there's a vendor that's taking a product to market that meets your needs, go buy it. And then there's the other camp that says, no, you should go build your own software, right? And so today what we want to do is really unpack the benefits and the downfalls of each and why there's not actually a right answer. We don't think that it's always buy or always build, and why we think that situationally speaking, one could be better than the other. A combination could be better than any of them on their own. And really, it doesn't have to be buy is right, build is wrong, build is right, buy is wrong, and why the argument is kind of effectively useless. And we'll kind of unpack our thoughts around that today. But what I want to do also, Cam, is kind of throw it back to you around why would a company want to control the software development lifecycle? What would be the desires behind that?
Yeah, so when you typically sign up with a SaaS-based company, the company that is your vendor that you're utilizing to run your technology is going to make decisions based on the client base as a whole. You may ask for enhancements that may not fit their roadmap, may not fit the rest of their users. So, for example, say you ask for something that's unique to your business, and it only fits 2% of the client base of the SaaS company. Well, automatically what's going to happen for a majority of SaaS businesses is that's either going to get rejected, or it's not going to get worked on, or it's never going to become a priority. And so when we talk about controlling life cycle of the development, it gives you the power to determine what's most important to your business, what you want to see built, what are your engineers working on, what is going to differentiate you from the marketplace. Whereas you have a lot of tech companies where everyone's utilizing kind of the same technology. What if you want to change that, you want something to be very unique to you, you have to go down the build path. You can't go down the buy path typically.
And for people that are considering building, this is something that I think you have a wealth of knowledge on that I think is something you should share. So when it comes to like running an engineering team, managing a project, handling all these builds and these dev life cycles and these deployments and these QAs and all of these things that non-technical people just don't think of, can you shine a light a little bit on what it really takes to run an engineering team and manage? I know we could have a whole show on this, but just kind of some key points that people might not be thinking of.
Yeah, that's a huge question. It's a lot of work. No, it's the biggest thing I recommend for any business that is looking to hire engineers, bring technical people on staff, is to make sure that whoever's managing that technical team is technical themselves. The last thing you want to do is put a businessman in charge over technical people because they typically are not speaking the same language. So a few things that are things you have to take into consideration when you hire a bunch of engineers under your team is that you either want a CTO, a director of engineering, or a lead engineer, someone that's going to actually lead that technical team to build what you're looking for. And the other thing you have to take into consideration especially if you're a brokerage, is that it's not what you typically focus on. Running a brokerage is very different from running a technical team. And so you definitely have to take the approach of separating the two concerns in regards to here's management of our technical side, here's management and our sales team that's running the brokerage side, and make sure that those two teams are in constant communication, meeting each other's needs. It's a lot of work, a lot of planning, and you definitely have to take into consideration the cost behind it because engineering is not cheap.
So let's get to cost. Let's get to that later in the show. I'm curious, And I have some intimate knowledge, having worked next to you for the last 7+ years. But you've been building software products for much longer than I've been in the industry. So let's help people understand a little bit around timelines and why does a 6-month timeline initially oftentimes turn into 12, 18, and how that happens and why it's not out of the ordinary. Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Sure, absolutely. So when we talk about timelines in software, a lot of the times you can spend a ton of time writing the scope of the project, and you can meet with a customer, meet internal with your team, and talk for hours about planning this project. What happens for a large scale development, like you were just referring to, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, is that there's a lot of unknowns that can occur. And those unknowns, you don't know how much time each one of those unknowns are going to take as you get to them or they come up. And so what you see a lot of the time is you have full intention to build something that's going to take 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it may be. And then an unknown pops up, or there's a delay in communication from one party or the other. And then that same project now runs out even further. It could take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And it's not that it's all just straight coding time. It's not that your engineering team is every waking hour just spending on coding. There's a lot of moving parts to development. And one of the most important things, just like on the business side, is communication. And so if any line of communication is broken, or if there's any assumptions being made, that's where a lot of technical companies or even people asking technical companies can get in a lot of trouble, is that there's assumptions being made that these individuals are going to understand what you're asking for, where that can delay projects as well, where you finish the product based on the conversation that you had, and that can actually create a delay because the outcome wasn't what you had in mind, but you never actually communicated those certain things that you were discussing. So
we never see that, right?
Nope, never once. Never happened.
So safe to say that it's going to most likely take longer than you initially planned or longer than was initially scoped to finish the project. I mean, I think it's almost unavoidable that it's going to take longer than you initially thought, right?
Yeah. And Ian in the audience talking about scope creep, that is, we try to avoid that as a company ourselves, but it happens often, and controlling that is sometimes a challenge within itself, because things just come up as you start to develop and you're like, wait, what about this? Oh, what about this? So yeah, it can become very, very difficult.
For sure.
So Mike, flipping back to you, who does it make sense for? When we're talking about buy versus build, it's a big decision that you have to make. Who does this make sense for?
Yeah. So just speaking from firsthand experience, we obviously sell a TMS to brokerages. And so we'll just take that vertical to kind of expand on. So what we've seen, it's typically around the $50 to $75 million a year with freight spend under management, around $50 million to $75 million. And why is that? It all comes down to resource allocation, right? And you have to have enough extra resources to deploy towards building a project, right? Prior to $50 to $75 million in revenue, what you typically see is that money being reinvested in hiring a bigger carrier sales team, hiring more back office support, what I'll call traditional brokerage employees, regardless of what the department is, up until about, again, that $50 to $75 million mark, annual revenue under management. We find that there's not enough extra resources to deploy towards a full build. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be building little things here and there. That doesn't mean you can't have in-house IT staff for like integrations and all those things. But typically, you're buying commercially available products like RTMS, like point solutions, like tracking solutions, capacity solutions, what have you. Something that someone else has built out of the box available for you, because your resources are better deployed towards scaling your team and your operation than they are towards building a custom product. So that's typically what we see it makes the most sense for, is at that level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely resources is something that has to be considered if you're going to go into any type of software development. As we all know, it's not cheap. So Why can't your vendor just build whatever you want? So if someone comes to us, as we're a TMS provider, if someone comes to us, why can't we just build whatever's being asked for?
There's the answer I want to say, which I'll say because we're not a custom dev house.
Yeah.
The politically correct answer is because we can't meet the demand of all of our clients, and that is true. So look, let's just take it from our own experience, and we're not unlike a lot of other freight tech providers or other commercially available products. We have lots of customers, and every customer wants something different. We're not building a custom solution. We do our best to have defaults and to have settings and to allow people to, utilize the tool differently depending on the way their organization works. But at the end of the day, we're building for the masses, right? And other vendors in commercially available products are building for the masses. And so if we took in all of the requests and all of the customizations that we get, which are pretty much daily, and don't get me wrong, our clients have some awesome ideas. Most of the product we have is from them, but we can't take everything and build everything because then there would just be this like Frankenstein system that doesn't make sense for anybody, that has no continuity of design, and is just a mishmash of a bunch of like cool features that one or two different people use. And really getting into like overall system design is, Cam, maybe that's something you can shed some light on. And can you talk a little bit actually about that, like overall high level system design and why that plays into us not being able to just build what everybody wants?
Yeah, sure. So I do want to call out Ian made a really good point. It's about understanding what the customer is asking for, how you can best solve for their problems at the end of the day. They may be asking for something, but you may have a better solution for them that not only works for them, but also works for the rest of your clients. And actually, to even build further on that, what Ian's saying, and Michael, you obviously know this, a lot of what we do on the engineering side is we take an idea that's being asked of us and we look at it from that lens. How can we build this so that it works or is customizable to a certain extent for the rest of our client base? And that was kind of the whole idea when we went to re-engineer, redesign, and rebuild our platform from the ground up. But to go back to your question, Mike, why can't we just build whatever we want and just add whatever clients want? From an architectural standpoint in your software, you would literally destroy what you're building. It would start to slow down. It would not work as well. It would become very clunky. We've seen this in systems in the marketplace. And as you know, being a very transparent company, this is actually why we as an organization made the decision to sunset version 1 of our application and rebuild from the ground up, is that there were a lot of engineering teams involved on that product before even I joined the company. And the way it was architected was not built for scaling. And so there's a lot of decisions from the engineering side that you have to take into consideration if you want to be able to scale, to be able to support $1 billion organization or even bigger. You can't do certain things. And one of those things is add 1,000 defaults in your application. And that's why you hear, even in our industry, that's why you hear in our industry, like a lot of these companies have to break off and build their own software at a certain point, is because you would literally break the architecture of a platform if you build what everyone wants the way they want it as a SaaS provider. It's just not reality. And that's not just in this vertical, that's actually in all verticals. So you look at like Asana or any of these other applications, they get tons of enhancement requests a day, but they build maybe 0.25% of what's requested of them.
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about, obviously, like in the beginning of the conversation, what are the benefits of building your own software and why you would want to do it. And then, talking a little bit about why we can't build a custom solution. And what I think is interesting, and it's something we should share, Cam, is why would someone not want to build their own solution? And I don't want this to come off as like self-serving, because like obviously we have an out-of-the-box solution that we want people to buy. But taking off your 3PL systems hat, just in general, and you being a technologist and having managed these projects again, why would people not want to build their own solution? What is something that you see as being a downside of it?
It's a lot of work. So that's probably the number one answer. But number two is definitely for what we do, specifically freight brokerage support. It takes your attention away from what you're really good at. So majority, if not all, freight brokerages are founded by people who were sales individuals at prior freight brokers or big carriers or these other organizations. It is not their forte 99.9% of the time to manage engineering teams, to work on the engineering side. And so when you go down that path, there's a lot to consider. Again, one, what is it going to cost? Engineering, again, I keep saying is not cheap. Two, you do have to hire a technical leader to be able to lead those engineers and be able to output what you're looking for. Three, you have to consider server support. You have to consider security. You have to consider a plethora of things that is not just what does it take to build, it's also what does it take to support it. So there's a lot that goes into that. So the path of actually choosing whether or not you want to build something, there is a ton of items you have to consider and also realize what is that going to cost? How's it going to impact my bottom line? One thing I will say though, being playing devil's advocate on what I just said, for brokers and even companies that have built their own solutions, it does increase their valuations when it comes time to sell, because technology, a multiple on technology is going to be much higher than a freight broker. So if you own the technology that's running your organization in a successful way, it can increase your valuation. At the end of the day, when you decide you're done or you want to pass the reins on to another company. So there's a lot of benefits as well for the hard work that it takes to support it.
Yeah, we've seen it. So Cam, can you talk in generalities around the cost of engineering? Because you've mentioned it a few times, and I know you can't say like the project is going to cost X, but maybe like, hey, an onshore engineer costs X amount per year versus an offshore engineer costs Y amount per year, and kind of what the difference is and different ways to kind of splice up the cost there.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak on this from two different directions, because we're big believers on onshore development here in the U.S. So a majority of our engineers are going to be based in the U.S. It's much more expensive here. Your senior engineers are obviously six-figure salaries starting, and that's low to high six figures. And then the lowest is going to be 70,000 and up. And then offshore, it ranges from costs $2,500 a month to $7,000 a month, depending on where you go and the quality of the team you're after. So and that's just the engineering side. And one engineer isn't enough to build a platform. You need a group of engineers.
It is if you have 5 years, right?
To build a small platform.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is what does it take to actually build the TMS? And let me tell you, it is a lot. No, it's a lot of work. It's costly. And there's definitely benefits to going the buy route. One thing Ian in the audience has been very interactive, and there's a lot of things that he's saying that are really, they make a lot of sense, and they're actually things that we do. So like collecting data from our clients, similarities among their requests. We do a lot of stuff like that. And we do that through things like Heads Together, where we have these open, transparent conversations with our client base, where we actually tell them as a group, tell us the bad, the good, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that we can improve ourselves and decide what does our roadmap look like. The one thing we don't do, even though we have a deep understanding of how brokerages run and how they operate within their organizations, is we don't dictate the roadmap based on our agenda. We dictate it based on our clients' agendas. And so I just want to address that point, because it's such an important thing for us as an organization that I thought it was worth bringing up.
Is that Ian McLeod? I can't see the live comments.
Yep.
Oh, hey, Ian. Yeah, Ian knows what he's talking about. Ian definitely knows what he's talking about. I appreciate your input, man.
So, Mike, can you talk to us a little bit about on the support side of managing a TMS as well? What would that take from a support side?
Yeah. So it depends if your tool is commercially available or not. Obviously, like for us, we have to take into account, a technical support team, and for a helpline and an email inbox and all that kind of support. And, you got to staff that up to make sure that you have the bandwidth to cover all of that, which is not cheap. But even for someone who's building a proprietary tool just for their own company, we even have clients that have internal employees that are specifically help desk for our tool. Right. And they've bought our tool, but they're such a big organization that they've deployed individuals inside of their org to support our tool specifically. A lot of companies have like a product owner, pretty typical role inside of larger organizations. So the ongoing maintenance, and here's the other thing. It should be no secret to anybody on the call that technology breaks sometimes, and like APIs change and like code changes and things need to be updated. And so like, that doesn't just happen, especially if you have hundreds and hundreds of API connections, which is pretty common, at least in the freight tech space, and I know in a lot of other verticals. You have to have engineers on staff. Like your product's not done. You don't just build and then like that's it, right? So you have like engineers on staff, if you're doing it right, that have to like pay attention to bugs and improve and update frameworks and like change things on the front end and like add a field here and there's a new integration need or a new customer. So the build doesn't stop. And I think people that don't know product development, I was guilty of this before I came here. It's like, no, the product's done. What do you mean you built it? Not the case. Like not the case at all. And so, I would say, I mean, even for us, right? Like if we got no requests, and no requests, any new requests at all, what do you think, Cam? We could still build for the next 7 to 10 years without getting any new requests. Like our roadmap is that far out, right? Easily.
Yeah.
And we already have hundreds of paying clients, right? And so the product is done, but it's never done. And that's a good thing, right? But so I think people need to realize that these software tools are like living things. They're growing and they're changing and they're improving and just they're different today than they were 6 months ago. And so if you aren't looking at it that way, and if you think it's just an upfront cost one time, you're going to die a slow death eventually, and your tools are going to become outdated.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I've been a part of so many conversations, even at large freight brokers and organizations where they have multiple platforms running their companies, and someone makes the decision, okay, we're going to stop building, that product's done. Well, the moment I see that and hear that, I'm already thinking that you're going to fail because of the fact that you're not investing in the R&D of what is the core platform that's running your business. And so staying up to date with technology is one of the most important things. And when we talk about buying, not building, that is one of the major benefits is you choose a vendor, you choose a partner that truly believes in staying up to date with the latest and greatest technologies out there, because that means that you're going to have the latest available to you at all times, where you don't have to invest in updating what you said, frameworks and things like that, so that you're staying up to date with technology. It's more important than ever. I can't stress this enough, especially with where we're headed, even as the entire world, heading into this generation of AI, ML, and RPA. RPA, for everyone in the audience that doesn't know, it's called robotic process automation. It's just another way of automating things. It doesn't utilize AI and ML, which is more of just a word that people are using right now than anything. Most companies who say it are not using it. Anyway,
that's a whole other show.
That's a different show. We'll have one on that. No, it's that's the benefit. That's a major benefit of choosing a technology provider, a vendor, especially if you do your research and market research and understand, do they actually care enough to really invest and focus on R&D in their product day in, day out, and stay up to date with technology? It's such an important question to ask.
Yeah, Cam, I actually can see these comments. I just had to tab over. Ian wants to know, you can answer this, if 3PL Systems is a monolithic app or if you use microservices.
It's a great question. We utilize microservices. If we went with the monolithic approach, it would not support some of the much, much larger clients that we have, especially, the clients running over 9 figures and in freight. So, yeah, we've gone down the microservices approach. We should do a nerd show one of these days where we're just talking about
come on.
the actual engineering side.
Yeah. Ian, I might be reaching out to you, man. Maybe you can come on the show, and you and Cameron.
That'd be great. I would love to have him on.
You and Cameron can nerd out. So before we go, we are running a little bit short on time. We got about 4 minutes. I wanted to kind of tie all this together to a point that I made in the very beginning about what's the debate. Look, we believe the best approach is a hybrid approach. This is not an original idea. There are very large companies, let's use Redwood as an example, who's built their whole technology and offering off of MercuryGate, right? This isn't like news to anybody. If you're in the industry, you know this, right? So I'm not like sharing anything that's confidential, right? But it's not uncommon. And why is that? Because you don't have to build what you can buy. What do I mean by that? Let's take us, for example. If we have someone who approaches us with a desire to build a tool and they want to build from scratch, we can say, hey, wait, hang on. What if we do some sort of a hybrid approach? Let's get in a situation where we can provide you maybe with the perpetual license to our technology, and our technology might get you 90% of the way to where you want your custom system. Because a lot of this is the same, right? You got customers, you got carriers, you got loads, you got documents, you've got tracking, you've got customer portals, carrier. A lot of this is the same across all TMSs. But if you can buy 90% of what you want your tool to be, and then you can build the other 10, 15, 20% on top of that base that you built, all of a sudden you saved yourself millions of dollars. You saved yourself months, probably years of time, and you can bring a custom offering to your team with a much lower budget and in a much quicker time frame. And so we think really there isn't a build versus buy. It's build and buy. Buy where you can, build what you can't buy. And that's the best of both worlds. And there's plenty of people out there that are doing something today. You might just not know it, right? A lot of these people have a hybrid approach. A lot of these mega brokers have a hybrid approach, even though they have a proprietary tool. And it's a really interesting thing to think about. So I think the debate's stupid. I think it's both. I think it's buy where you can and build where you can't buy. That's kind of my 2 cents.
I can't agree with that more. You could save literally 8 figures by doing that. It's a lot of the people, just to add one more thing to that, a lot of individuals I've heard, I'm going to set off, build my own TMS internal for my brokerage. It's going to cost way more than you think it is. It's not cheap.
Yep.
Costs a lot. So buy versus build. I agree, Mike. Hybrid approach, if you're even interested in doing it, is the way to go. And when you go down that path, again, look for what technology is it built on? What stack is it built on? Definitely focus on that, because you want to be on the latest technology if you go down that path. So to wrap up the show, again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Next week, we are going to have Eric Hulk from Y Logistics joining us. So definitely tune in next week with us. Mike, any final thoughts before you go for today?
No, just thanks for the conversation, Cam. It's always good. I always appreciate having you around because you're so much more technical than me. So it helps to fill the gaps where I can't. So and Ian, thank you for the interaction. Everybody who's listening in, we appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next Friday, right?
Yep. Awesome. All right, everyone. See you next Friday.
Have a good